Hello, hello, welcome back. And so now that you're pro at recognizing what the structure of an APA style table is, let's try recreating those in Word. All right, and so first of all, when you start a table, you really want to think ahead about the layout. And so what is the table going to look like when you finish it? I would recommend that you look at sample tables in journal articles. I've included some in the lecture slides and so on. And then you want to count the number of rows and columns you need, and that will help you when you start editing your table. So I would recommend that you plan ahead and think about the number of rows and columns, and then insert your table. So if you go to the Insert tab in Word, you will have a menu for table, and you can kind of do a drop down. You want to just keep your mouse button pressed. So you can use the grid that appears here, right underneath, or you could use the Insert Table menu that appears. So it is your choice about which style of insertion you do. Either use the grid to just kind of show Word how many columns and rows you want, or you go to Insert Table and then just type in the numbers of rows and columns that you need. So let's do a demo together. It's really a practice, but let's say that you wanted to create this table. Now, one of the things that you want to do, again, is to think about how many rows and how many columns you might need. And so, well, let's count. And so rows are the number of horizontal lines you might need. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we need 5 rows. How about columns? Columns go up and down. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Oh, lo and behold, this was actually not planned. We have 5 by 5 table. And so let's jump over to Word and see how we can get that going. See you over there. All right, so here is Word. And I know that depending on the type of Word or the version of Word you're using, some of the menus may look a little different, but hopefully they look similar enough on your machine as well. All right, and so we know that we want to do an insertion of 5 by 5. And so where do I go? You're probably pointing to this menu. Go to Insert. Sure, let's do that. So I might want to do a 5 by 5 like this. I could start it like that. Or I could go to Insert Table, depending on my preference, and just say, give me a 5 by 5. So today, let's just do a 5 by 5 here. All right. Now, this is a good start, but it looks nothing like where we want to go. Now, we do want to adjust lines, right? You might remember that we don't have so many lines in an APA style table. Now, for planning purposes, though, it's not the worst idea to have these grids still. We can adjust that later. So I might recommend that you just keep them there so that you can see where the columns and rows are, type stuff in, and then start working on the border. So that would be my strategy. All right, and so let's start typing in the information that we need. Now, when you start typing, you might notice that right now things are not looking as wide or as narrow as we want them to be. One way to adjust that would be to use, if you put a cursor over the column border here, then you can adjust it. So that's probably one of the easier ways to adjust sizing of your columns and rows. Another way to do that is to actually, if your cursor is on a table, go to the Layout tab, and then you can make adjustments. So you can do row height, column width, and so on. But many of us, if you're just seeing it on the screen, we might want to just manually adjust for now. Don't I type fast? You already knew that though, didn't you? Anyway, so all kidding aside, I've entered most of the data that need to go in here, but you will notice that there are some things that I haven't inserted. And also the borders and spacing and all these things still need to be adjusted. And so let's begin to format this table. And you're probably thinking, what about non-major, major? So it might bother you that, hey, I want to write non-major here and I want to write major here, but I can't do it because it's separated into 2 columns. And so let me show you how to do that first. So you will merge the cells in order to create one cell for these 2 columns. And you can do that by highlighting those cells and then go to merge cells. like that. And so you do the same over here. And then you'll be able to write down non-major and major. All right, so now still lots and lots of editing to go. Now, you might be wondering, sort of what's happening with these columns. They're so unevenly spaced. One trick that I often use personally is to just double click on these column borders to just kind of do natural fit. And so you can do kind of like auto fit here and say, please auto fit contents. I usually just double click, and that's a shorthand to have Word kind of figure out how wide does this column need to be. And so you can see that the column sizing looks much better this way, that it's more even. It's fitted the content. Now over here, columns ought to be centered in terms of alignment. So over here on the left-hand side, the very left-hand column should be flush to the left, so left alignment, so that's good. But here you want to make them centered. And so I would highlight those cells, and then you can go to layout again, and here is the alignment. And so I usually use this so that it's aligned in the center both vertically and horizontally. So that looks a little bit better to me. Now another thing that I'll probably want to adjust is the row height. This is pretty compressed, and because this has 2 lines, it takes 2 lines. Technically, of course, if you wanted to, you can just also double click and make it fit. But let's say that we wanted to follow the example that we saw, and so I'm just gonna go back to when we need to have courses taken on the second line. So let's say that you wanted to space out the rows. Then you can go here to cell size and just make adjustments. So you can just kind of flexibly adjust if you would like. And here I noticed that, these guys end up kind of getting squished to the top of the cells vertically. And so I will probably adjust the alignment here so that vertically they are in the middle as opposed to stuck on the roof of those cells. All right, so it's getting closer. Still a ways to go. This one still needs to be centered actually. So here we go. And then it's getting closer to the original table. Good. You might want to adjust the font, in which case you can technically right click and adjust the font to Times New Roman if you will. You could also just go to home and then use your trusty font menu to do Times New Roman as well. And usually, with Times New Roman, 12-point font is usually recommended. So let's go there. Looks even closer to what we had. One thing to note about this left-hand column. The left-hand column, they actually call the stub column. And so this is stub heading, this is a stub column where you kind of write down important variables. Now, here, this is one small note that the AP style actually specifies, is that if you have a stub column where you need to have 2 lines, where you don't have enough horizontal space to fit everything into one line, so it just spills over to the next line, then you actually want to do a hanging indent. So you go to your trusty line spacing options, and then you might remember the hanging indent is right here. And instead of doing a massive hanging indent, they just want you to do a tiny hanging indent of 0.15 inches. Tiny. And so let's see what that looks like when I do that. Poof. Looking pretty good so far. All done, right? You're probably thinking, what are you talking about? You're not done at all. You should not have all these grids. It's too busy. You're absolutely right. And so now finally, let's start adjusting the borders now that we've formatted the table. Now, the borders you can adjust by going to Table Design. Now, do note that these menus only appear if you have a table selected. So if my cursor is somewhere else and I'm writing the body of the paper, then you will notice that there's no table design or layout. And so make sure that you place the cursor and click on your table in order to activate the Table Design and the Layout tabs over here. These are the table tools you need. So I might actually start by just wiping out all the borders and starting afresh so that you're not having to worry about removing certain borders here and there. So personally, I just kind of do it that way. And so let's say no border. Ooh, a naked table. This is not good. So let's start fixing it. All right, so we need its hat. And then we need to also help separate the headings from the actual data. So we want to have a bottom border there. Now we also need to have borders under non-major and major, just so that they know that this is non-major and major describe and go with these mean and standard deviation notations. So it's repeated twice for that reason, right? That there's mean and standard deviation reported for non-majors and then the same reported for majors. And so again, your favorite table design, bottom border, and then one more. We need another bottom border. Poof. And now we have a beautiful, beautiful APA style table. And then we want to start adding the table number, title, and any notes that you might want. All right, so now you know how to build and edit APA style tables in Word. Hooray! Congratulations! Now, when it comes time to actually write your own APA style tables and figures, I would encourage you to come back to this lecture and refer to it as needed, as well as to refer to the APA style resources that I've posted on Canvas, including the APA style blog pages on tables and figures. In the meantime, my best word of advice to you in this section is to just go ahead, play around, and have fun when you're at it. Imagine it's like a sandbox and you're just trying things. It's not gonna necessarily go right the first time or even the second time. Usually there's a fair amount of pruning and editing that you have to do as you go and try on and error. But that is par for the course, and I hope that you have a lot of fun trying different settings and see what works. All right, well, take care, and I look forward to connecting with you in the next video. So that's all for now. Bye for now.